Yes, we are live now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you for this special edition of the webinar on the new age risk. As many of you are aware that we have been doing this particular program for almost last 10 plus years, and we try and address the key emerging risk scenario within the corporate sector and the strategies to mitigate the same. And the key highlight of this program is the release of Vicky Pinkerton India Risk Survey, which captures the risk as perceived by corporates. So this is an annual exercise which Pinkerton and Vicky had been doing for past 10 years, and this is going to be the 10th edition of the report which we'll be launching today. So with these words, I once again welcome you all. And to move further, I request our mentor, Mr. Rahul Chaudhary, who is the mentor of FICCI Committee on Homeland Security, to deliver his formal welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, uh, Professor Anil Gupta from NIDM, Rohit, Karnataka Managing Director, Pinkton, friends from industry, government and media. This is indeed a moment of pleasure and probably great pride for all of us that we are continuing with our efforts of bringing the India Risk Survey report. It's almost 10, 11 years that we have been doing this together with Pinkton, and this has been one of the very critical inputs which has gone into many risk management discussions in the corporates. The entire methodology of going to corporates, bringing it back and then filtering it and then putting it back to them allows two things. One, individual biases are checked against, because when the group really thinks together, it is not a group thing, it brings in, it's a risk mitigation strategy in itself. The India risk strategy, this report has been used by many organizations, including my previous organization where I was CEO. But over the last 3-4 years, the nature of the risk has changed, and what we used to call the black swan events have seemed to have become normal risk mitigation pieces. COVID is 100 years back. We had an equivalent pandemic. But for last 2 years or 2.5 years, 2 years plus, that has dominated our life, thinking, and all actions. It also brings out a very different kind of resilience which is required and which we need to do to keep the organizations robust, and if the commercial organization and the engine of growth is going, only then will we really see security, prosperity come together. So it's a very important piece where we need to think this through. We have been working very closely with, during the pandemic, Vicky has been very closely working with the industry, the government, and there was a communication bridge between the government policies, what was working on the ground, what was not working on the ground, and trying to find a match. And that's one of the best risk mitigation strategy, because timely communication is the most critical risk mitigation strategy. And if you go back and get out of the jargon, but the most common risk mitigation strategy which we have all experienced is fire safety management, and you have drills. Why do you have drills? You have drills because you know if the disaster happens, how to act. And the quicker we can do that, the better we can do that. It also is a fantastic communication tool to do what you have to do when you are faced with a disaster. And in that context, I think one of the major risks which has started to emerge is the risk of cyber warfare and cyber capabilities. And that is a non-kinetic kind of a war. And one of the elements which I see uh, lacking is preparedness to come out of a cyber attack. How, that is one piece which we are defensive about cyber attack, but we are but when the cyber attack happens, and one of the things about cyber attack is it's a non-kinetic, non-lethal, and therefore it is far more political than it is military. And therefore the ability to come out of it and how to practice coming out of it is also gonna be one of the defining strategies, not only for the corporates but for the country in times to come. uh, yes, globalization and interconnected risks have globalization brought interconnected risk, but globalization also brought interconnected mitigation strategies. And what after COVID we are seeing is a redefining of supply chains, which is also a mitigation strategy. So these are, and it is creating new kinds of opportunities for all of us. And the companies and countries who will do this better will benefit. How and what is something which needs to be thought through, and a Pinkton report helps us bring our reflection of the situation and gives us pointers for the future. So I am very, very glad to be associated, and FICCI is very glad to bring this to its members, because this gives them a mirror as to what is possible, what are the options, what others are thinking in a very structured manner. Risk mitigation is ultimately about getting the structure right, getting the process right. And uh, if we can't think about the risks, we can't think about the process, we cannot mitigate it. So it is a very important effort, and I am glad that we are working with NDMA on this. Uh, I believe member would be joining us very, very soon. We are very grateful for all that we have been trying to do on the risk side with them. It helps the country's risk infrastructure become more resilient. And that dialogue which FICCI can provide is good for the country, it's good for the corporates, it's good for India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your opening remarks and your perspective, which we talked about some of the risks, particularly from the cyber perspective and the associated risks which are there associated with the cyber. You also touched upon the fire and the disaster aspect of it. So, going forward, may I request now Mr. Rohit Karnataka, who is the Managing Director, India APEC and EMEA region of Pinkerton, to uh, to share his theme presentation, and I'll request him to take us all of us through various findings which are there in the report, and what are the uh, risks which have emerged this year as perceived by the corporates. So very interesting presentation. I can foresee that, and Rohit, as always, look forward to your presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Sumit, for the introduction. Let me just share my screen. I just bear with me for a second. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, please
thank
go ahead.
you.
Okay, great. So thanks, Sumit, and thanks, Rahul sir, for the opening remarks. And I think it does give Pinkerton a lot of pride and pleasure to be associated with FICCI. And as we've been saying, this is our 10th year of association for the India Risk Survey. And definitely, this report has made its own inroads within the corporate as well as the government sector. And not just lately, but even the media, NDTV reported, quoted this when there were a lot of fire instances that have happened in the recent past in some of the hospitals and some of the other corporate arena, where they have said that fire has always been and has been mentioned by Fickey and Pinkerton as one of the key risks to the business, right? So what I'm trying to bring together for you is, how we've been able to do this and how we've been able to bring it together. So as Sumit said, ideally this is the 10th edition because we started this journey in 2012. We call it the ninth edition because we had to skip it in last year because of the pandemic situation. And I will elaborate on that as we move ahead as well. But this is actually a comprehensive risk, as Rahul sir was also mentioning in his opening address, and it basically takes up the entire holistic 360-degree approach to risk. We take the voices for different people across the sections, including people who have more geographical outreach as well, people who are not just looking at risk from India perspective, but are also responsible to look at risk from Pan Asia perspective or a global perspective. We also take their feedback as well and try to bring it all together to do that. And what we've been doing to give it more and more independence to the report, we now engage with third party professional people who obtain these surveys and obtain these inputs for us, and FICCI to be able to complete this risk for us. What we've been following throughout the this journey is the comprehensive risk perspective. Just as Rahul sir mentioned, that unless we don't understand the risk, there is no way we can mitigate it or we can plan to mitigate it. And I think we've been insisting this for the last 5 6 years in the India Risk Survey. Along with FICCI, that we need to take a proactive approach. I think our entire approach to risk across the country is more reactive. I think we need to move on to a more proactive approach, and I think that's what this survey is trying to bring in, is that awareness for corporate and the government to take a proactive approach. And in that, we've been picking up the comprehensive risk perspective, where we look at risk from all the four quadrants, right? And if you look at the quadrant of hazard, event, technology, market economic, and the top quadrant, and you'll be surprised that one of the nodes in that quadrant that we mentioned a few years ago was pandemic, right? And look at what happened in 2020, and we were more relevant about it. And the entire relevance of the report would come as we move forward, and I might be able to point that, which will bring, to answer to some questions that, which Rahul sir and I have been trying to insist again and again, that this report has its relevance across the sectors, and we will see this as we move forward as well. Has been the journey so far, right from the first launch from in 2012. We moved on. We started taking industry experts on board. We tried to take their voice. Then we introduced the Pinkerton Risk Wheel. We felt that the comprehensive risk approach is going to help. And then we further brought in the risk categorization. We relooked at the way we were looking at risk. Then we realized that a lot of corporates have moved online, and our approach of obtaining feedback should also become online. Earlier we used to reach out to people more physically or only through emails and ask them to fill up the survey form. Then we realized, why should we not have an online link? We created an online link and we became digital. All of that happened much before the world rushed towards becoming digital after the pandemic. We understood with FICCI much earlier, and we brought in the online link. And then this year we've added the emerging risk as well. And few years back we added the emerging risk, but this year we've changed the color and tone of it, as Rahul sir said, that the black swan event that happened a few about a year and a half back is still going to remain with us, and that's something the business has to learn to live with it for a couple of more months, if not years, I hope so. This is the journey. I think some of you have been with us for a pretty long time. Just a memory reminder. for Sumit, who's been actively associated, and Gaurav with the India Risk Survey, how the cover page looked like all of these years and how we have evolved. And it has taken some burning of the midnight oil and some brainstorming with Sumit and some good discussions and fights with him to come to agree to what the cover page should look like, apart from definitely how it should be presented. And I think the India Risk Survey report, which we're going to release, this is just a precursor of how the cover page is going to look like. We've made it more design authentic to the digital world, and to give an idea of how it is like. So even the cover page has been evolving, and we've not kept it constant. We've just looked at the what is happening around and make it more relevant from that perspective. The emerging risk, I would just take about 30 seconds to focus on this. There were some of the unforeseen risks that came up in with the Black Swan event of the pandemic. And in 2020, when we looked at it and we were supposed to do the risk survey, we went back and we had a discussion with Vicky. We realized, if we reach back and start doing the survey at this point of time, it will be completely colored, because every corporate, every individual, everyone in this country or across the globe had only one thing in mind, had nothing else. And we were not even thinking about business corporates at that point of time. It was about saving lives, right? So it would not have been the right thing for us to digress or diverse the attention in any which way. So we collectively thought that we would give 2020 a skip for the India Risk Survey, not give it something which will not be relevant to the market, relevant to our people who really look forward to reading the risk report and then planning their strategy around it. So we said that let's wait and see how it emerges, and then change the way how we are looking at risk with the pandemic, understanding the fact that we are going to live with it for a couple of few more months, if not years, as I said earlier. So what we brought in was, we spoke to the industry experts. We could understand that there are four more areas that have now evolved as emerging risks. And in 2020, what happened, and in the entire 2021, the corporate, the government, and all of us individuals have learned to live with the pandemic, right? It may become a pandemic, it may become an epidemic, it may change its color, its tone. There will be peak and there will be valleys in terms of, as we call them, waves now: third wave, fourth wave, fifth wave. That's how it's happening. But the four things that the corporate and the government is realizing now is the health risk, the improvement or the collapse of the health infrastructure, the risk of transitioning the remote to a remote workforce, and going back to work. These were the four biggest risks that every corporate or every government entities that we were interacting with, they said that that is now in the back of our mind. Those conventional 10, 12 risks remain. These are the additional risks, because we now have to live with this event and this situation for a few more years. And it will take industry and every government to come out of it completely. So therefore, we thought that we will add this to it, and we intend to continue to monitor it. So next year, when we release the report, I hope so, we will be able to give you what was the ranking of health risk in our survey in 2021, and what is it in 2022, and then what is it in 2023. So we intend to continue with it till the time we feel that it's completely nullifying, or no effect or no impact on it altogether at all. This is the overall risk trend for 2021, something that we've all been waiting for. You guys will very soon have the copy of the reports as well, shared with you. And I hope very soon we have Words from Mr. Words from the NDMA also joining us and releasing the report as well. But this is what it looks like. As anticipated, natural hazards come as the number one risk, right? And can't agree less with it. Natural hazard was right at the top of it, still remains at the top of it. Information and cyber insecurity is something that has come up the curve. I think this is to do with more work from home, and a lot of organizations now realizing the impact of it. And as Rahul sir also mentioned, that cyber war or cyber something, the inside actor or or as we call it, as the government actor, or an actor, that is working on behest of some other, enemy, is definitely there. So next war is going to be more about cyber warfare more than anything else, right? So it's going to be more about kinetic in that sense. Intellectual property theft is something that we see and realize, that a corporate is realizing. Fire, political and governance and instability, I think it's coming more from the corporate sector in terms of, some of those aspects of retrospective which the government is trying to, improve and change. I think that's giving it a little bit of an attention over here, and maybe some bit of the local government elections that keep happening and that sometimes changes some policies, especially for example labor policies, that are dependent on state governments as well. So definitely those kind of aspects as well. Accidents, whether on the road or at factory sites and all of that, still remain a focus area. Business espionage is again something, the corporate is worried about. Strikes, closures, and unrest is coming down. I think these days, that's not the focus area in that sense. Definitely terrorism and insurgency is coming down. uh, Corruption, bribery, and corporate frauds has come down to strike bottom at 10, which is a complete contrast to the previous surveys where it usually used to be among the top three, four. I think there are a lot of inferences that we can draw out of it. I think the attention is different, or maybe we're becoming a little more honest. And with the Black Swan event, I think a lot of people are realizing, there is more to it than just being corrupt. So I think, maybe the society is changing, but definitely it is going down in our risk rating from what it is. And when I do the comparison, you guys will able to see what I'm really saying, because it is creating an impact somewhere. And then we have crime at 11, and then threat to women's safety remains at number 12, but it has not dropped off completely. So it means it remains the focus of people and everyone around who participated in the survey as well. So the natural hazards, the information cybersecurity, the intellectual property theft have come up well. And I think, this time we had more than 700 plus respondents that were part of this survey. They were across the industry. They were also from a pan India to people with their area of responsibility being across the globe, as I mentioned, and across industry as well. So I think from earlier, where our respondent used to be somewhere in the range of 500 to 600, Rahul sir, I'm pleased to mention that this time we crossed 700 plus, which basically means that people are interested in contributing and then getting the value add from the survey like this, and then going back to the drawing board and drawing their strategy with regards to this. And in fact, I'm pleased to mention that, we about a few years back, before the pandemic started, we were reached by some of the similar kind of trade organizations in some of the other Asian countries, where they came up to us and said that, we've looked at the India Risk Survey report that really helps us to understand, in a particular area when we want to make an investment in India, and we want you to, can you slice and dice it further for us, so that we can look at it, for the specific area or the specific area where they would want to make an investment. And this is an investment where they were making in conjunction with the government, and where we were looking at going east, right? And they really wanted us to go a little more slice dice into the east section of it, and tell them that, what would be the right business and which will be the right stage for them to make their investment. And we are talking about a few billion-dollar investments over here. So the report was being referred by them when they were taking these decisions as well. This is an interesting slide, the overall risk trend pre and post pandemic. And what you see is the 2019 ranking at one and the 2021, right? So as I said, see, 2019 corruption, bribery, and corporate fraud was number one, right? And now it is at number 10, which basically tells you the relevance of the entire survey, because the focus of the corporate CSOs and the risk officers have changed. It also meant that there were lesser opportunities for corruption. It also means, on the other side of the fence, is that maybe our focus on it is much less at this point of time, and therefore do we need to go back and relook at our strategy to see I hope it is not going to the blind corner of the eye, right? There is genuinely less of it, and hopefully we are not falling into a trap where, when we do it in 2024 or 2025, when there is no impact of the pandemic, we all of a sudden realize that corruption, bribery is back at number one, and we realize that, it was never gone, but it was there somewhere, but we were not focusing on it, right? So I think it opens the thought process for all of the thought leaders to see, right, is it genuinely going to tend because there is a change in society, or is it because our focus has digressed from that perspective, and it is natural. The second one is the most interesting part. In 2019, natural hazards was at number two in our survey, which basically talks about including one of the notes for natural hazard was pandemic, right? Which basically means that when no one ever heard of this black swan event or even thought of it in their wildest imagination, the feedbacks that we were getting from the industry was very, very relevant because they themselves felt natural hazard as one of the topmost risks for them. Right now, anyone can say it is completely colored because everyone is thinking about the pandemic, first wave, second wave. So there is a colored thing, but in 2019, no one heard about it. And when we did this very well before COVID-19 even came introduced to the world, we did it in the third quarter of the year, right? So basically, it meant that the survey was very much relevant. We are hitting the right nail on the head. The important thing is that when we talk about natural hazards, in our risk notes, the fire, accidents, and some of these are separate notes altogether. If you look at the section on fire, which is at 4, and an accident at 6, so which means they are not coloring the natural hazard. Natural hazard always remained about earthquake, pandemics, flood, and all of those situations. And it has always remained on top of the corporate focus, right? Crime 2019 was at 3, came down to 11. Obviously, there were a lot of lockdowns. There are a lot of areas where the crime reduction has happened. Again, maybe the same as corruption. Maybe our focus is not there, but definitely we can see the crime index, and a lot of the NCRB report also stating crime definitely has come down. The fourth and fifth on political and governance stability, as I said, has almost remained the same, has gone one step down. I think it's coming more from the perspective of sometimes when there is a policy change, or sometimes when we go back into a retrospective way of looking at certain things, the corporate does get some jitters around it as well, right? So from that perspective, I think terrorism and insurgency has to come down, and I think that is what is the important part. And the intellectual and property theft has gone up. From the perspective that now the corporate is worried about the information cyber and the intellectual property threat, because work from home is changing some of the other aspects of it, and bringing those risks right at the top. So natural hazard, information and cyber security, and intellectual property theft have become 1, 2, and 3, which basically tells you how the business and the corporate is evolving from that perspective. I'll just move on to the next one, because I think there's more for everyone to read, and I don't want to take away the charm of the report as well just by discussing it over here only. This is how it is from a region-wise perspective: east, west, north, south. The natural hazards again, focuses right on top. But the interesting part is the information and cyber security and intellectual property right largely remains second and three in all of the regions, except south, where somehow they feel business espionage is more important, because I think there are a lot of startups over there which try to catch each other's, what is happening as a trend, or they want to know about what is happening on the other side on the BEC seed funding. So I think there's a lot of espionage over there, and therefore it gives you that as a number three, as a concern. This is industry wise, which is the natural hazards. As I said, the financial services obviously feel information cyber security is more for them, because they have all of a sudden come to the focus, and they feel that they should have been better prepared for it from that perspective. So I think they feel that as a risk number one. I think this is more that we will read in the subsequent slides as well. Okay, this is the risk ranking outside India. So all of those people that were from outside India, what was their view on the risk rankings as well? These are the emerging risks. We will talk more about it as we move in the different panel discussions as well. So as I mentioned, health risk was one. The risk of transitioning to remote workforce was two. and the collapse of health infrastructure and going back to work. These were the four different notes that we touched upon this time, and this is how the respondents ranked them: one, two, three, and four. And I think they are pretty relevant as well from that perspective. And I believe Mr. Watts has joined the forum as well. So welcome, Mr. Watts. Thank you so much that you could join from Pinkerton as well. Our pleasure to have you in the forum as well. So that's it from my end. Sumit, I hand back the baton to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rohit. That indeed was very, very interesting. And the numbers and the stats which you just mentioned, as always, it's very, very fascinating. And well, it's indeed an honor for us that Sri Krishna Vatsaji has joined us today for this session. As we all know, he's the member of NDMA. And thank you so much, sir, for kindly joining us and for this particular session. And before I request for him to deliver his keynote address, I'll request that the report be kindly released. So I request my colleague from IT to kindly share the screen. And so this is the report which we are releasing today. And sir, just to briefly mention about it, the presentation has already been done by Mr. Rohit Karnataka, Managing Director of Pinkerton. So this report we have been doing has been done between FICCI and Pinkerton, and this is the 10th edition. For last 10 years, we have been coming out with the risk survey, and which forms a most sought after report as far as risk is concerned in the corporates, not only from a day-to-day operational perspective, but also from the investments perspective as well. So we'll be sending a copy to your office, sir, and we'll be seek your guidance for further editions. And now request you very kindly to share your perspective and deliver keynote address with us, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and share my thoughts. At the outset, I would like to say that I'm a student of natural hazards for a long, long time, and I have been referring to this Pinkerton Risk Survey for a long time. So I do refer to this document to get data and statistics on the impact of natural hazards. Yeah, and I find this document always very, very useful. At the same time, I would like to have a few suggestions about the risk assessment. One is this, that the underlying database for the risk assessment in India is not very strong. We do not collect the data on individual hazard events, and that's a very serious lacuna. And even within I recognize that there is a need for a much robust database for the hazard events and all kinds of hazard events, and maybe this is an opportunity for collaboration with the FICCI, and because this database is extremely important for both understanding the pattern of hazards as well as the magnitude of impact. So that's one thing, and we are definitely keen to improve database for understanding the nature of risks. The second thing I think I would like to suggest is this, that it is far more important how to understand how the risk transmits from one end to the other end. And at times the reports miss out on that. It's one thing, see, on an average, we have an impact of $10 billion annually due to natural hazards. But it's not just $10 billion. $10 billion is not a huge amount. How it affects the development, how it affects the purchasing power, how it affects the state of infrastructure in certain areas. That's extremely important to understand. Why it is so that some of the states which are repeatedly affected by natural hazards, such as Bihar, West Bengal, or UP, perhaps particularly the eastern part of Uttar Pradesh, they continue to be economically lagging behind. They are not really benefiting as much from the rapid economic growth that the country has witnessed in recent decades. And this could largely be explained in terms of the transmission of risks, how a certain hazard event impacts one part much, much stronger than the others. And perhaps this also holds the key to understanding the pattern of resilience, how certain parts show greater resilience and certain parts are not so resilient. So I definitely would like to understand the transmission of risks across the country. And COVID is a great example how the risk transmitted from one segment of the society to the other, and finally it is spread to all parts of the society. The third thing is this, that there are certain, even if say at the national level, there is not a big risk, at a micro level, at a meso level, at the community level, there are pocket risks, and they are very, very important for those areas. Look at the drought in Bundelkhand, which affects this region time and again. And even though say UP is doing well, maybe a certain part of the state which is experiencing drought on a regular basis, it's not affecting the overall economy, but it's affecting the region, and it's really pulling down the state. So in the overall context of the risk, there are certain risks, there are pockets of risks, and you cannot understand the agrarian distress in the country unless you understand the pockets of risk. So that's another thing that I would like you to consider. And all this is what I'm saying is extremely important for India to transition to a 5 trillion economy. A 5 trillion economy cannot be unless we have risk management mechanisms for those parts, those segments of population which are more risk prone. And COVID has brought out how certain communities, certain sections of the society are more risk prone than the others. And the third part is the persistence of risks, how certain parts are getting battered time and again. Look at Odisha, how it is being affected by cyclones. So it has been able to reduce the mortality. But on an annual basis, its infrastructure, its housing, its livelihoods, they are getting affected by cyclones that they are not getting affected. The means of recovery, the investment in recovery is not enough to recoup what people lose. And that's again an area that needs to be looked at. So along with the pockets of risks, you also need to look at the persistence of risks. I think, I really welcome this effort because we do not get many risk assessment reports. And risk narrow community in India. It needs to grow. We need to understand the risk in all its complexity. And we also need to develop mitigation strategies. And unless we have very robust risk assessment strategies for the entire country, risk assessment for the entire country, we cannot devise those mitigation strategies. So in the NDMA, we are now encouraging, we have just set up a national mitigation fund. We also have set up the state disaster mitigation fund. All these mitigation funds would bring a huge amount of investment in mitigation. And we cannot really implement the mitigation unless we have risk assessment at the micro, meso, and the national level. So in the next few years, I definitely see a lot of risk assessments happening across the country. And when we conduct risk assessment, we will definitely take a cue from this report, which has been there for a long time, which has been presenting a survey of risk with the inadequate database that is available. So let's try to improve the database. Let's try to expand the community of risk assessment. Let's try to make the methodology of risk assessment more robust. And let's look at the risks in all its dimensions. I think this is what I would like to say. As I mentioned, I congratulate you of this report. This is a very, very useful reference document for any researcher, for any student of risk assessment. It's also I would say, a guide to the development. So if, as I mentioned, if India has to become a 5 trillion economy, it cannot do without an effective risk management strategy. And these studies are extremely, extremely important. So I again congratulate the authors of the report and invite them for a continuing discussion. We would like to expand. And it is NDMA's duty to do that. And we look forward to joining hands with you. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share these thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
No, I'm saying I would like to leave because I have another meeting. So if you can.
Sure. Thank you so much for kindly joining us.
Sir, can I just make one point? Rahul Chaudhary Vicky.
Yes.
Sir, one of the critical risks which is coming out of this study is the cyber. From the corporate perspective, with the kind of digital working we are now seeing. And one of the things which I find lacking in our preparedness on cyber is a non-kinetic weapon. It happens, it goes away. But as a country, we do not have, like any other risk, you need a mitigation strategy and a recovery strategy. I would request NDMA to work within the governments to come up with a recovery strategy as well for cyber. We are not focusing on cyber about a recovery strategy. We are only talking about some kind of defensive strategies and things like that. But if something really massive happens, we need a recovery strategy, and it is because the primary target are going to be your critical infrastructures. And therefore, I would request NDMA to think about it, and we would be happy, and I'm pretty sure wherever we can help in and work, we would like to facilitate and work with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's a very, very important concern. And though we do not deal with the cyber risks, I have seen some of the discussions at the highest level in the government where they have taken cognizance. I mean, I think there is a very serious discussion on cyber risk, cyber security. So if you can just share a note with us, I would be happy to take it further and share it with the Ministry of Home, which is our focal ministry. So please send us a note on this issue. Thank you.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll do that, sir. Thank you so much. Thanks for your vision. And we really look forward to collaborating with NDMA and making it the risk assessment and mitigation more robust. And thank you once again for your time, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So, before moving on to the next session, I would also like to recognize Professor Anil Gupta, who is the Professor of Policy and Strategy, the DRR and Sustainability and HOD of Center of Excellence from NIDM. He has joined us. Thank you so much, sir, for kindly joining us. We also have Shri S.K. Varshne, who is the head of International Cooperation from Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, who has also joined us. So thank you so much, sir, kindly for joining us. Now we move on to the next session, which is the first panel discussion, which is on emerging risks from pandemic, long-term impact on business continuity. And I request Mr. Vijay Sahu, who is the Group President, Strategic HR from Chairman's Office of Reliance Industries Limited, to kindly chair and moderate the session. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumit. Good morning to all of you, the panel members and all others present here, the audience. It's a privilege to be here in FICCI Forum. We have very strong and a long association with FICCI, and this is a very important subject today. Post-COVID, we don't know whether COVID is post or again, World Economic Forum is saying, World Health Organization is saying there is a fourth wave coming. This is very timely, taking the cue from the previous discussion. I think it has set the tone, the agenda for our discussion. We have very eminent panelists and experts in their respective fields. I have a great pleasure in welcoming Professor Anil Gupta, Policy and Strategy Program Director for Climate Resilience Program in NIDM, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India. We have with us Dr. Ashish Mittal. We welcome you, sir, CEO, Occupational Health and Safety Management Consultancy. We have Mr. Ram Shankar Pandey, Managing Director, Hella India. So Mr. Pandey has very varied experience in consulting and industry. So I saw he leads some tricky road safety aspects. So we'll be very happy to hear him. Most importantly, we have Mr. Ravi Chandran. So he comes from risk mitigation industry, that is the insurance industry from Tata AIG, and they actually provide for protecting people from the risk and the assets from the risk. So we are very happy, sir, to welcome all of you. So there is a report which the report describes the contour of this seminar and the larger going forward agenda for FICCI and others. You heard Mr. Baksa talking about the government's priorities. So today our theme of the discussion is emerging risks from the pandemic. We don't know what are the risks from the pandemic and what are the risks which may not be from the pandemic but adjacent to pandemics. Today when I opened the newspaper today, the nuclear power plant is in fire so you don't know what kind of risk it is. You are not putting a nuclear bomb, but the nuclear power plant is in fire. So they said, what is happening all around us in terms of different wars and different threats to our own nation and internationally to different nations. So whether that is out of COVID or it's a kind of risk which the world should take cognizance of, and what are the long-term impact on the business continuity. For a moment, if we keep business aside, if you look at the risks to us as individuals, our physical health, our mental health, our socio-economic well-being, each of us, our families, and people around us have gone through the experiences in our organization, colleagues. It has not been good. It has not been good. We have forgotten largely because the things have subsided. If you remember March 2020, and if you recall the migrants all over the world trying to find a home back, the journey back home, those stories were kind of FICCI also that time participated well in mitigation. So those risks were much bigger in pain. Society forgets, but then one risk after another we all are experiencing. So we have panel members who can focus on the physical, mental health aspects. The larger one is actually socio-economic health. So today what's happening is inflation is affecting a section of individuals. It is affecting all, but disproportionately to one section of the society, and it has a linkage with the social unrest, etc. You are seeing world over. You never heard Starbucks in US having a union in US. Now they have a union, and you never thought कि Amazon का warehouse workers will stop Amazon operations. They are stopping it. So different opportunities came, and a different individual suffering led to many other risks. So some risks got intermingled between the socio-economic aspects. So I'll request our panel members to pay some attention and focus on those areas based on their interest and expertise. Largely, if we classify the risks into 4 categories, there will be public health and business operations risks. Second will be market and economic risks. Third will be talent and skills risks. Fourth will be socio-political and geopolitical risks. So all of them may not be from COVID directly, but directly or indirectly, these are the risks today we as a planet are interfacing. So I request the panel members here to throw some light and share their wisdom and experience, how to mitigate these risks for us as individuals, families, nation, and society at large, and the planet as a whole. So I'll now invite Professor Anil Gupta. He has an overarching view based on the research and academics. He can give us some wisdom in regard to this. Over to you, sir, Professor Anil Gupta.
Thank you, Sahu Saab, and my compliments to Vicky for coming out with this wonderful set of information in the form of this report. So Rohit ji is here. So congratulations to entire team, and we are very happy that we are working with Vicky very closely on promoting the cause of safety and disaster risk reduction across various spheres, including the homeland security, also related with natural hazards, industrial risk management, and also road safety kind of issues also. I will be not speaking for long. I have 4-5 points here, very quick points to give my reflection for the next editions of the report, maybe 23 or so when we are developing, and then we'll be having by that time we will start witnessing the medium term impact of the COVID-19 period also, because now as we are looming into some kind of uncertainty whether we are going to have another wave or not. Even if the another wave is there, that may be more of a kind of a endemic rather than pandemic. That is what we are anticipating. However, the pandemic has given one very important lesson. That is about the unknown unknowns in the area of risk management. Because risk management is about anticipating the future or what can go wrong. So here, basically, pandemic kind of things that the experience that industry had has put a big question on anticipating the future. And there, in fact, not only one scenario, how many possible scenarios can emerge. I think this is the new thought process for the risk assessors. During pandemic, we also had a lot of complex emergencies. So not only pandemic, we had industrial emergencies combining the pandemic. We had major cyclones, and when we were saying that do gaj ki duri hai zaruri, and when we had to evacuate a lot of people and keep into cyclone shelters. How to do that, and how to maintain that distance. So that was issue. We also had heat wave, and we were asking people to wash their hands 20 times, use more water, and on the other hand, there was very less water available, and water was scanty, not available. So the kind of dichotomy that we have, and that also puts a question that how do we prepare for the future disaster risk, along with when we have the targets under SDGs, to improve the life of the people in all the spheres of development. So that is important. We also had locust attack, a major locust attack, and I think there has been scanty research on the economic dimensions of locust attack, that how it had affected the agriculture-based economics and other natural economics, natural resource economics. Uh, Chamoli incident that also directly relates with the infrastructure loss. One of the power plant that got vanished in the Chamoli incident. And Chamoli incident, I think there are a lot of gaps in the understanding or gaps in theories that how it happened, because some of us say that it is a glacial melt, but it is not a normal kind of glacial melt. So there are certain also questions that whether it was some kind of technology driven disaster or man-made disaster as a purely natural disaster. There are also the different layers of stories. But however, what is important that we have to start looking at the concept of that we already have, the business impact assessment. So business impact assessment, two more dimensions, that looking into the range of uncertainties for future, and second also how do we integrate the lower order risks, because that is also very important. If we recall the Kolkata the bridge collapse, and we find that the small incidences were taking place past 2-3 months. So many times these lower order risks that serve as a early warning also, I think those are also important, but many times we tend to ignore these risks. Second point comes, and I would say that cities, energy and infrastructure. This is a big transformation we are going to see, and that has a very direct linkage with the sustainability of the industry as well. Because we have whether the infrastructure industry or the consultancy industry or the insurance industry also. So there are two set of challenges we are going to face. One, the new infrastructure, how do we plan the infrastructure to be resilient? But at the same time, we are also trying to maintain the existing infrastructure. So existing infrastructure age is one of the very important component. And besides age, if the infrastructure has been built 20 years back, that time the concern about risk management was not very strong, and the concern about the extreme events were also not that strong, and those concerns were not factored in the structural design of those things. So how do we improve upon those, looking into future? I think that is very important. Another layers of the economic transformation, or understanding of economic transformation in the coming time, is investing in natural infrastructure in these areas, in cities. And how do we prevent unnecessary expenditures and invest in promoting natural infrastructure systems. There are recent initiatives from the corporate sectors also, like leaders for the nature. Many industries have joined and they have formed this kind of group, that how they integrate with not only CSR but also that how the expenditure on cooling can be reduced. The expenditure for cooling water can be reduced if we are maintaining natural infrastructure system. So there are many such good examples. So those are to be thought of. In urban systems, the new thought process that is growing very fast and very important for India also is how do we manage the risks associated with the peri-urban systems. Peri-urban systems, most our waste management treatment plants are there, waste segregation plants are there, even grain mandis are there, but there are water and sanitation challenges. Most of the labor markets are also there. I have personally witnessed during the COVID first wave, and this migrant laborers, all issues, those were the areas the migrant laborers were there. So I think that is also a clear point of concern for industrial sustainability as well. So how do we start looking at the peri-urban systems, which also provide a kind of the favorite location for many of the ancillary industries and the warehousing and all these things also. The third point is basically how do we start looking, giving more emphasis on regional and local economics. So the understanding the GDP and other things at national level and state level, but ecosystems are the river basin kind of things. That has a different boundary. And if there is a drought, then the implications of drought can be understood better based on the basin characteristics or the watershed characteristics rather than the district boundary or the taluka boundary or the state boundary all the time. So I think how do we start look this kind of a understanding that these dimensions, regional dimensions and local dimensions play significantly in economics also, and then certainly the issues related with green GDP will also come. Already the parallel discourse is on that the current approach of GDP has to go under a transformation, and new concept of national and local economy has to emerge. So I think that is also very important, and there in fact we will have the opportunity to see that possible integration of this vicious cycle, that how the faulty development can increase disasters and disasters affect the development. So that is important. Then the fourth point that I would touch, that the country, when we are discussing about Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and we are along all the sectors, across all the sectors, we are developing a vision plan for 2047. So whatever thought process was there 20 years back, what is thought process is today is entirely different. And I think 2047 or 2050, we are going to have an entirely different scenario, particularly in two major areas, and that is very important in risk assessment and risk management also. One is the disruptive technology. I think there is a disruptive change in the area of technological interventions. So how the risk dimensions are going to change. Even I say that next 5 years are most critical, most crucial. I think by even before 2030, by 27 or so, we are going to see a disruptive transformation in area of technological use. And also alongside that, we are also going to see the disruptive transformation in the social settings. People are getting more concentrated, more attached to the gadgets rather than person to person interaction. So how we are going to see disaster risk scenarios in the new social settings and new technological settings. So I think these are very important clue to help us start peeping in the future. So our projections for the future should not be limited only to the scientific dimensions or the climatic projections, but also alongside that, the man-made directions, and those include the technological transformations as well as the social transformation. So these are some points which I thought of sharing, and very important report is there that really helps us revisit the strategies across almost all the important business sectors, that how do we start our strategies for business continuity or business strategy in the light of emerging risk as well. So thank you very much for inviting, and my compliments to Ficky and all once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. Very, very nice, comprehensive view of the things, encompassing economic, environmental, geopolitical, social, and technological. I will now request Dr. Ashish Mittal. He focuses on health and safety management consultancy. So welcome, sir. We'd like to hear your views in regard to this. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are on mute, Dr. Mittal.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu, and thank you, Ficky, for this opportunity. And I've been listening to the report also, and I think I am not aware of this kind of report I've seen first time, but that was a good way for me to learn few of the things which we were thinking that as part of occupational health and safety, where we are placing all those things. So basically, as we know, this occupational health and safety, it has been a great burden on the health part of it. We know we have been spending a lot of, it was HIV or other things which were having more visualization, but occupational health and safety, which as per ILO and WHO, we lost about 4% of GDP in occupational health and disease, occupational diseases, which are not, visible at all on the larger scenario. We know about the accidents happening, industrial accidents happening, we count them on, we know about the valuation of those accidents. But for example, occupational diseases, COVID-19 has brought forward that there are threats to business from the infections also. But many occupational diseases, if we say like backaches, or maybe noise-induced hearing loss, or maybe musculoskeletal disorders, they have been great disadvantage to the working force for many years, and focus has not been on them. But as part of the mitigation programs also, we have been thinking about the occupational health and safety. And once we go to the industry, and we bigger industries are always complying, but for it's always a challenge to micro small enterprises, where health and safety is not very large priority, because they don't have the resources, they don't have the knowledge kind of thing. And then if you see that these diseases, they have been a great burden, and they always put you back on the productivity aspect of your business, right? So COVID-19 brought up, like, you wear the mask, you wear the PPEs and all those things, which were forefront on the for industrial safety. But now with this COVID-19, that has been a great upbringing, that okay, you need a kind of PPE also, and common people are aware of PPEs now, right? So to begin with, I'll say that COVID-19, which was an unpredicted public health threat, which has forced the globe to new ways of working and living, right? And there were immediate response to, once we saw that we have a immediate lockdown in last March 2020. And that was forced closure of many of the businesses also, with disruption of supply chains and threat to many of the stakeholders for even the survival also. If we go from the beginning of the supply chain, so those people who were taken aback along with the sickness part of it, right? So business was closed, and they were sick also. So both of them, the things were happening together. So there were sick employees or employers also. There were quarantine protocols. There were diagnostic challenges to the COVID also. There were travel bans. There were rescheduling of works, and there were different protocols of different state governments also. So if somebody is sick, how long he has to be quarantined, kind of thing. And it was globally. It was not even like if one state to another state also, to other states also. So these challenges, they started to pour up with the business and health of the business. Health of the employees also. So it was for the few initial period of the pandemic. But then once the business was reopening, it was great challenge to rearrange the business also, because then you have to make a protocol of maintaining a distance of 2 meters, or maybe you have to redo your canteen area, you have to redo your machine arrangements, so that you can accommodate all the workers, all the work which you are doing, and you can have infection control also. You have to comply with the infection control strategies at the workplace, at the manufacturing units. We have witnessed many of the industrial accidents, starting from the styrene gas leak in Visakhapatnam on May 7th, 2020. So all those things were happening simultaneously, and there was nobody was there to guide the business about the infection control at their premises, because lockdowns, and we were busy in taking care of the health of the sick persons. So those who were healthy, they were just getting the information that okay, you have to be doing whatever protocols you have to follow, like universal precautions of mask, hand hygienes, and social distancing, all those things. But translating into the workers perspective, okay, so for example, hand hygiene, so you have to wash your hand for 40 seconds. So translating it into work areas, and sticking it to it. it was very difficult. Wearing the mask, how to wear the mask, how to dispose of the mask, which mask to wear. If you are already exposed to some chemicals, you have to use some canister masks also, or maybe there were several other issues which industry was facing as per the infection prevention protocol in their premises, as well as the other things which they were doing. So these challenges was mainly met by like starting work from home for many of the industries, which could migrate from physical presence of the employees to the work from home strategies. And but this was ongoing program for many of the corporates or IT industries, but now it was for most of them, they have to adopt to this work from home strategy. So according to one very small study which was taken place, 80% of the workers who were working from home, they said that there is an increase in the working hours from now, work from home. So it was from 3 to 4 hours of more working per day for them working from home as compared to physical work from their work sites. 40% claimed that they don't have the proper workstations. So 13% using sofa for their as a workplace, 25% were using bed for their workplace, 26% dining tables, and around 36% were using the study tables as the working place for them. And 96% have reported that physical ailments to them, neck pains, shoulder pains, back pains. So they have started with them, those who were working from home. And they were also reporting reports of working at the weekends also. So there was no margins of workplace or work home life. So these were the few issues with them they faced. And then this raised the mental health issues with the employees also. One was there was many job losses due to shutdown of businesses, or maybe you have to scale down on your carriers. Your job pay cuts were there. So all those challenges were again associated with other mental health issues like PTSS, post-traumatic stress syndrome. So somebody who has gone through the COVID infection, so he was having many fears for many months coming together. So they were always under stress, anxiety, all those things, and many of them could have faced depressions also. Then there was issues of interpersonal relationship with the your bosses and with your colleagues, because remote working were bringing up all these. You face to face, you were managing all these issues, but then these issues has surfaced up. Then there was issues of lack of motivation to these people who were working from home. There were isolation, they were working in isolation, so isolation, that they were hampering with the isolation. There was no sportive supervision to these workers. So all those issues were again like challenging to all these new work regimes.
Dr. Mittal, I'll request you, sir. We have limited time. The next
Sure, sir.
panel is also
I'll
coming
finish.
up.
I
We
will
have two
finish.
more panel members. Yeah.
Sure, sure, sir, sure. So all those issues were like, then we have the other issues, like if you have already have comorbidities of the workers, and all those issues were taken again the hot seat, and skilled employees were replaced by the unskilled employees. So all those issues have much challenges for the occupational health. Vaccination was another issue at the workers who were hesitant to vaccination. Again, that was a big challenge for to comply with. Again, the authentic information to these workers were again a challenge to communicate to these workers. To have a business continuity in with the challenges of this public health or occupational health, we have to readjust our risk assessment for the workplaces, including the biohazards now at the workplace. It may not be the concern initially, it was just the concern for the hospitals only for biohazards, but now it is the concern for many of the workplaces now. Not many of the, but all of the workplaces. So we have to have the risk assessment, we have to have the strategy to control this risk assessment with all of the new kind of budgets which required to have the infection control strategies, including the sickness of the employees, if family of the employees sick, then insurance of the employees, training of the employees to have new skill sets for emotional, mental, and technological skill sets. And then it has to be have a role and responsibilities for all of the throughout the across the organization. And then it has to be have a organizational commitment to have a proper workplace program for infection control, not for COVID only, but if we face newer challenges in the coming years, then we have to be ready with these solutions. So that is all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
For the opportunity.
Thank you. So I'll now request Mr. Ram Shankar Pandey to please give his brief.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. I think in the interest of time, we have to cut short our, let's make it very, very brief. I think from all these urgent topics what we just discussed, let's look at a little bit on a broader perspective that when businesses and me as a business practitioner, what we are looking at now, a major shift. This is first time that the work and life came together, the home and the office came together, the society and the business came together. Now that is irreversible change. I don't think that's going to change. And because of that, important perspective is our businesses serve to consumers who are part of the same society which face this, pandemic, and the realization and the shift of mind added with the technological disruption is actually going to ask for biggest risk, which is the business model risk now. That the consumers and the employees are going to perceive employers and the businesses very differently post this era. And now, having said that, how do you see that alignment of businesses with the society so that they still can motivate employees? Because today, if the employees have a different perception about their job, their workspace, and they are the same one with consumers. And you can look at already very clearly how they push on even investor community. So from a shareholder management, wealth creation of any businesses over a longer period of time is under threat now because of the business model being disrupted due to the consumer behavior change. So as the consumer behavior will change, I think Mr. Sahu, you pointed out the mental health and the people, how they, because the risk is what you perceive. Now businesses perceive the risk, even individuals have started perceiving the risk, and both have to mitigate. And probably this is where comes that from the shareholder management, businesses have to look for stakeholder management. They have to now look at how the social good or the SDG of all the United Nations have been talking so long has to now marry the business models. We have to find out a balance between this profit planet combination rather than just going in one way. Even the investor community, you saw that in COP26 conference this year, how they have prioritized ESG is on a center of it. So the SDG and ESG has become the central part of it. Now, how do you prepare businesses looking at that? So our boards and our management team have to now understand and work on new business models to cater to this new sector of consumer so that it marries the social goals with our business's goals. So I'll keep it very brief that if there are any questions in this regard or any doubt in this regard, I think we need to be clear, and the capacity building has to start from now, because when we are talking of 2050 or 2047, these changes are not, or these capacity buildings are not easy. So we have to start now. And as I told, risk is what we perceive the risk, what we, quantify the risk. And the biggest risk when we see on the business model, then also biggest asset has to be built in that area. Biggest resources have to be put in that area rather than those urgent things. I think those urgent things anyway get attention of management very, very fast. But this is something which is there written on the wall. We have to kind of perceive it now and start working on aligning our businesses with a purpose. For example, if so many people are killed in India on road crashes, how long people will see that these cars are not only a good transportation method, but also a killers. So how do you marry this and come up with ideas which makes society also grow, businesses also grow, and that happens together with the investor community putting a focus on that. Even the accounting policy and accounting principles will change soon, which will value the balance sheet of the earth similar to the balance sheet of our businesses. So I'll end the short comment here and look forward for your question. Thank you, Mr. Sahu.
Thank you, thank you. It's very good. It's very good. Well, Mr. Ravichandran, you are in, sir, the best industry which can give the deepest wisdom because you have every day been managing and mitigating risk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. And in of time, I would also like to keep it brief. I wouldn't repeat any of the points that's been covered by the past speakers. I think we spoke about risk, right? And first, my compliments to Fiki for bringing out this risk survey. And I was just quickly looking at the overall risk ranking, the top 10 risks that are being listed out. The good news is most of them can be insured in the form of an insurance policy, right? And I'm not surprised to see cyber moving up from what it was in the previous year to the number 2 risk being as a perceived risk. A few things that got missed out, possibly as maybe people are not tuned to looking at other than the physical risks. I think to my mind, the biggest long-term impact, apart from the fact that long COVID that people are speaking about, what repercussions it can have on the health of the people who have been impacted with COVID remains to be seen. But I think a couple of key points that possibly I would like to highlight are, one, I think the learning loss for India's young is going to be really felt very badly in the days to come. I think it has created one, unfortunately, it happened in the month of March, just before the summer vacation. And whenever I keep going for a stroll, when I take breaks during the long hours of work that we did, I felt that possibly the summer vacation has been prolonged for the children for a long period of time. I think it's almost 2 years. Very happy to see now people are getting back to, kids are getting back to school. I think this learning loss is going to be a major one. I think government would do well to see as to how they can possibly do some corrective mechanism in the way schools teach children and cover up this couple of years of academic loss. I think attached to that would be the inequality in terms of the learning. While a lot of people who have been in the cities, urban centers, have been able to get on to an offline course. I have my own doubts in terms of to what extent students have been attentive. But the fact of the matter is there are people, there are kids which are many in number, particularly in the rural parts, the hinterlands of India. Number one, they could not get access to the device through which they could possibly listen to the online classes. And sometimes they had the device, but because of the net connectivity or the power not being available, they could they were missing out a lot of I think quality hours of learning. So that, to my mind, is the paramount risk that would be felt for a long time. And the corporate India, the government of India, and various governments, starting from the panchayat to the state governments, who do well to address this big time. The second one, obviously, is the cyber that people have spoken about, and we are seeing this in the insurance industry, right? I was talking to some experts in the cyber insurance in the world, and they made a very startling comment. They said there are only 2 types of companies in the world. One, people who had cyber attack. When I say they had cyber attack, they knew they had a cyber attack. And then they said the second set of corporates are those who believe they did not have a cyber attack, but the fact of the matter is they had cyber attacks and they are either refusing to believe that they had an attack or they are unaware. So I think cyber is going to be a very important aspect of the risk, and we are seeing that happening even today, right? When Russia and Ukraine are fighting it out in the traditional way of missiles and air force and hand-to-hand fights, there is also a huge amount of cyber attack that are happening. And sometimes, it may be directed at, let's say, a company or a government in Ukraine, but there could be a lot of collateral damages as well. Because today the data is being stored in the cloud, and they are trying to attack, let's say, some data points of relating to an enemy country. And if my corporate's data is stored there, we could become collateral damage. So cyber is going to be really, really big. I think the other aspect, though it has been touched upon briefly by the colleague who spoke in the past, in terms of mental wellness, I think it's going to be again a major issue for the world in terms of mental wellness. I think we are all we are all basically social animals, right? We are very, very comfortable in terms of putting a face to each other, having a small gossip in the corridor of the office premises, or while taking a tea break or something like that, or even going for smoke. A lot of people do go as friends to smoke. I think that little bit of conversation they had, I think that was giving them some sort of a venting out their feelings or their stress. I think that has not happened for the last 18, 19 months. And because of the hybrid nature of work that most corporates are going to imbibe, that may not be fully restored. So that's going to have its own repercussions in terms of burnouts. So that's where I would presume the corporates would do well to have some employee assist program. I think they also should help people to bring in, take some mandatory breaks. So a lot of corporates do have mandatory holidays. I think we need to imbibe that, make people on a mandatory basis take short vacations, go out with family and friends, and take their mind out of the business. And the other aspect that I also thought would maybe need to highlight is in terms of the cloud. I think we all have seen, right, their over dependence on one location, China, in terms of manufacturing, sourcing of manufactured goods, has really been felt in terms of supply chain disruptions. The same thing can happen in terms of cloud data service as well. A lot of corporates today are moving to cloud to have their data stored. It is much more simpler. It's much more efficient. It's cheaper. It saves a lot of time, money, efforts, everything. But again, people would do well not to depend on a single service provider, because if there is going to be an outage, and we have seen even the likes of AWS and Microsoft, Azure, they all had outages in the past. And if you're going to be dependent on one single source, I think the disruption can be very, very devastating. I thought these are some of the points that possibly need to be highlighted in terms of risk. And the insurance industry is more than happy, more than equipped to look at the transfer mechanism. The cyber policies are really coming up the curve. There are various kinds of policies for some of the risks that we spoke about in terms of intellectual property, political risks, and terrorism and sabotage. So I would end with that, saying that most of the risks that are featured in the risk survey are insurable, and I think the corporates would do well to contact their risk advisors and see to what extent they would like to retain and to what extent they would like to transfer. So that's it from my side. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ravichandran. Actually, we have kind of, because of the last session, this program is running 15 minutes late. I don't know whether we have time for questions, but I think all of you have very comprehensively discussed. And Sumit, we should probably close with a summary note rather than go for questions. What do you think, Mr. Sumit Gupta?
Yes, Mrs. Rao, I think the questions we could take offline as we are running late.
Yes,
so I'll request you to summarize.
I'm seeing that. So to summarize, my co-panel members have been very comprehensive. So certain industries have been disproportionately affected, their tourism, hospitality, and airlines, but they're coming back. The health risk of key leadership team in the corporates has been a risk, and a disruption in supply chain. They talked about semiconductor coming from Taiwan, China, and when you have oil price shooting up, you have the battery controlled by China. So lithium is all controlled by China globally. So you have that risk. Digital dependency has increased cyber security risk. And at the same time, world has been smarter with blockchain and other technologies. The asset bubbles have affected most of the corporates and the individuals. The market concentration has happened. The small MSMEs and weaker individuals have been more impacted by the larger corporations. Some larger corporations have managed the risk better. Rather, they have actually, if you see the market value of the larger corporations have disproportionately grown. The great resignation and talent risk everybody is experiencing in the corporate world, we all are experiencing. Reskilling has been a necessity because of complete transformational in terms of the job, nature of job has changed, the work kind of aspects have changed. Education inequality, very beautifully, my co-panel member touched about. And that actually for the rural area, because of the devices, etc., has been really hazardous. Many NGOs are coming up, but they have limited resources. Income inequality is causing social unrest. Overall, the geopolitical risk, when we started post-Second World, we thought interdependence is a greater virtue than independence. But increasingly, we're finding in every nation, they're trying to be self-sufficient. rather than interdependent as a planet. That's a dangerous trend. And World Economic Forum has listed out 5 risks. One is the social risk. Social risk they ranked as the highest risk today post pandemic. The second one is the environmental risk. We thought when we are not going to work, environment will be better, but they see as a very big challenge to environmental risk. Some of the colleagues talked about it. The economic and geopolitical risk is increasing. The technological risks are becoming self-balancing because one side of the cyber attack happening, another side is newer emerging technology like blockchain, AI, machine learning. They are also providing preventive care, automated preventive care to the ecosystem. So the corporates have their own way approach, differing degrees based on the collective talent and wisdom of the corporation in mitigating the risk. But overall, for an individual, for a corporation, for a nation and planet, these risks are now known, revealed. We had not seen it 100 years. For last 100 years, this COVID reminded us what all risks are the possibilities. And I think we are more knowledgeable and better equipped for the hopefully managing the risk better in days coming ahead of us. Thank you so much, Vicky. I don't want to take more time of the next panelists and Mr. Sumit and all my panel members, the audience, the media and associates. Very, very thankful to you for patient participation and hearing of our session. Thanks to you. Over to you, Mr. Anil.
Uh, Thank you so much, sir.
Sumit,
Thank
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, and thanks to all panelists. Very, very enriching discussion. Now we move on to the next panel discussion, which is COVID-led disruptions, opportunities for new business models. And we have Captain Parth Dayal from Pinkerton. I request you, Captain Dayal, to kindly moderate the session. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumit Gupta, for providing me the opportunity to partake in this discussion. So at the outset, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our esteemed panelists and all event attendees. It is a matter of privilege to moderate today's discussion revolving around a very, very relevant topic, which is COVID-led disruptions and opportunities for new business models. Now, before we begin, please allow me to introduce our guest speakers this afternoon. So we have with us Mr. Harsh Shah, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Institute of Risk Management. We also have with us Ms. Sapna Ahuja, who is the Chief Operating Officer for MapMy India. We have with us Mr. Sumanta De, who is Vice President for Unacademy. And we also have with us Ms. Rupal Sinha, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Quest Corporation. So just to begin with the scheme of affairs, I'd like to speak on the topic for a bit as a prelude, and will then give the opportunity for our panelists to partake in the discussion. So as we see that as the post-COVID-19 scenario looms, traditional business models are undergoing rapid changes, and the need to innovate and expand the business model portfolio becomes essential to enable enterprise survival and growth. Multiple trends are driving the need for business model innovation, such as supply chains undergoing pandemic-induced transformation, increasing environment consciousness brought on by climate change, the role of data across functions, and the shift from a product to a service model. Rapid innovation in business models featuring technological convergence will be the norm to sustain growth in a hyper-competitive world, while a lack of innovation can make businesses obsolete. So value shift from today's product-centric model to consumer-centric data, systems, and services in the new competitive ecosystem. Companies have begun serving customers to ensure stickiness and longevity instead of focusing mostly on product-based transactions. The emergence of the as-a-service model for critical elements of a business simplifies the product access with flexible payment options. Post-COVID-19, consumers will expect more tech-convergent experiences with single interfaces and platforms that unify their journey. Product experience, interactive engagement, and personalization will shape unified experiences of end users in customer-based models. Crowd-based business models that leverage the potential of crowd thinking, crowd capability, and crowd behaviors will create markets and uncover needs in a changing environment. Crowd-based models utilize the power of the collective, making this an essential category. Socially aware and environmentally responsible companies have taken the initiative in the adoption of circular-centric models. A growing consciousness of the environment and sustainability among end consumers has driven mainstream companies to explore circular economy-based models. Organizations must strategize to capture growth opportunities by adopting suitable business models to achieve measurable impacts, such as revenue growth, valuation growth, new markets growth, and new customer segment growth. Adjacent and new business models will outpace traditional businesses over time. Tomorrow's successful companies must build a portfolio of initiatives across core, adjacent, and new opportunities that support revenue growth. So with this, as a brief prelude to our discussion, I now invite Mr. Harsh Shah, CEO of Institute of Risk Management, to share a few thoughts on this matter.
Thanks, Parth, and thanks to Fiki for putting together this excellent initiative on risk management. Just to clarify, I'm the CEO of the India affiliate of Institute of Risk Management. Now, since COVID has been moving far away on the horizon in 2022, what we've seen is that most risk managers will be more concerned about what comes next. It's been a wake-up call for the risk management teams, the crisis management teams, that how do you start preparing for responses rather than reacting to any kind of events or uncertainties? Significant changes have happened over the past few years. Most businesses were able to adapt very quickly. In fact, we must credit the MSME segment where there has been a classic digital transformation and at such a great speed, which would not have happened unless a COVID would have hit us. Uncertainties also still exist regarding short-term and long-term impacts of the COVID-19, including a slower economy bounce back, extreme emerging risk arising from climate change, cyber attacks. We're seeing fake news taking up a great area of concern for marketing and branding departments. Mental wellness of employees, that's another area of concern. And of course, if you see the overall gamut of risk management, the most important factor that has emerged is risk intelligence as a skill. As the leading professional body across 140 countries, what we are seeing is a lot of students and young professionals have now started to value risk intelligence as a skill, and they've taken up our professional examinations, becoming supply chain risk experts, cyber risk experts, procurement risk experts. So you have a domain expert, but risk intelligence is now being embedded in every domain. I would want to work in the marketing team, but as a marketing risk expert, so that I can protect the organization's brand image and reputation. And then numerous threats and opportunities are existing regarding the key talents retention and recruitment, because we're also seeing subtle impacts of the great resignation in an economy like India, where there are so many aspirations at the young age, the speed at which the Gen Z wants to grow. Some of them want to become entrepreneurs, gig economy, trying to create unique business ideas for themselves. So how does corporate India or India Inc. really look at talent as another critical component beyond the mental health? And then if you talk about regulations, SEBI, RBI, Companies Act, I think all regulators have slowly started to realize that risk management, unless mandated, will not be looked at as a serious investment. And I call it an investment, not an expense, because if you don't give the due respect to a risk officer or a risk leader, just like there is a CEO or a CFO, the new role that has emerged in the boardroom is a chief risk officer. And the role of a chief risk officer is really going to be scanning the entire value chain of the organization, trying to constantly identify risk at every level, and then arriving at solutions and mitigating their impact. So this is just my introductory thoughts on how we are moving into an uncertain world on a path to recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Harsh, for your initial thoughts on the matter. Now I'll request Ms. Sapna Ahuja to share her 2 cents on the matter.
Thanks, Parth, and thanks, Vicky, to set up this forum and to also give an opportunity for to me to make my comments or share my opinion on the subject matter. Clearly, I mean, last 2 years of pandemic, they have taught us all the importance of digital transformation. What I strongly believe is that this digital transformation has to be data driven, more and more data driven. We've been at a phase where we are almost, I would say, we've been focusing on process-based digital transformation. Now, from process-driven to data-driven, that's a path that we are all on. We are on that path. But then, definitely, in this journey, the risks like cyber risks, intellectual property risks, they are a matter of concern, and they need to be, there has to be a formal way to assess those risks and also to be able to mitigate those risks. And it was really glad to hear from Harsh the kind of initiatives and kind of skill sets which are being focused on, and the kind of skill sets that their organization is trying to see that how we can get more people on this. So yes, adoption of digital technology has substantially increased, and now target segment is no longer just the millennials or the younger generation. It is every age group. I mean, the kids who are using digital to have their school, basically the education perspective, or if you look at oldies who are also using the technology for their regular activities, even their health monitoring, etc. So the point I'm trying to make is that both B2C, B2B, B2G applications scenarios, there is a need that I'm more focused on the risks which are originating from sharing of data, from the privacy related concerns, and even things around cybersec, and that becomes quite a lot important to be put a focus on. An organization like ours, so I represent a company called Mapma India. See, the organization like ours, where what we are doing is we are helping people build solutions around last mile deliveries, ride hailing, enabling KYCs which are more reliable. Or if we talk about B2B, insurance is a very important segment that is using a lot of data, a lot of location information, geographic information to see how they can increase the underwriting accuracy, to manage claims more efficiently, or to improve the whole customer experience. So that's like one side of the story. On the other side, even if you look at road risk assessment, I mean, we are also focusing on this area quite a lot, given the number of accidents that happen on the road in this country. So we're working with several organizations to ensure, even with the government, for example, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, to see how the accident risk on the road can actually be handled. And these are all very new, innovative, forward-looking use cases that helps the society, that helps the businesses to operate more efficiently, that brings in, also from the mental health perspective, if you're sending your kids, your family on a longer road drive. So these are very different types of use cases and different types of business cases that are coming up in the industry. So that do bring, I would say, more and more opportunity to the whole ecosystem. I won't say just the organizations who are into this business, but it does bring in a lot of opportunities of different kinds for the whole ecosystem. And yes, I mean, I'm glad to see that all organizations, everybody is working towards these opportunities while addressing the risks that come with these opportunities on the way. So that's these are my initial remarks. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on the matter. Data is not only the new gold, but the new platinum, as the saying goes. And now I'll request Mr. Sumanta De to please share his thoughts on the topic.
Thank you, Parth, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a fantastic initiative by FICCI to convene this initiative and to hear from all of us. I represent the EdTech sector, the sector that's possibly received the most amount of boost during the pandemic. But at the same time, I just like to share my thoughts with regards to the use and adoption of technology in general and how it has sort of helped us minimize the fallout, of the pandemic in terms from a risk perception perspective. Now, as we know it, risk, and how we perceive risk and assess and minimize it is sort of constantly evolving. And even before the pandemic, if we looked at it, but if there's one thing that has stood the test of the pandemic, it's actually the adoption of technology. And if we were to consider that if the pandemic had happened, let's say 20 years back, what would have been the fallout of the pandemic on various sectors and ecosystems, whether it is education or retail, hospitality, medical care, anything, right? So, irrespective of whichever sector you look at, I think it's fair to say that technology has actually helped us manage risk in a better manner during the course of the pandemic. If you look at the edtech industry in particular, an industry I represent and something that I can share my views on, obviously it has provided a huge boost to education in general. But by all accounts, what it has actually done is it has helped accelerate the rate of adoption of technology in education. EdTech companies and in general, even if you look at the government's efforts with regards to digitization of education, a lot of it had already started much before the pandemic. What the pandemic has done is the acceleration has actually picked up. At the same time, it's important to realize that technology in education is not a replacement for mainstay education. Mainstay education is here to stay, and it's by all accounts the core pillar of education and how we disseminate it, how we consume it. All that technology does in education is it breaks the barriers of access and affordability that would otherwise exist in a traditional sort of ecosystem. Newer, more scalable technology solutions and how knowledge is disseminated has actually resulted in minimizing the fallout of the pandemic on the education sector. We know from anecdotal evidence, there is some research being done that a large number of students, if it were not for technology, at least if you look at those who can afford it, that segment, if it were not for technology, then there would have been a huge knowledge gap of these 2 years in their lives. We understand that some knowledge gap does exist. It's not possible for technology to replace what schools and colleges would have given them. But at least that gap has been reduced because of it. Students from all across the country have actually been able to keep up with their studies thanks in large part due to the capabilities that edtech companies have built. So I believe, in conclusion, when it comes to education, there is a lot of risk parameters out there from a socio-economic perspective. But the more and more we integrate technology with how education is disseminated, how it's consumed, it's actually going to help us minimize risk a lot in this particular sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day, for sharing your thoughts. And most certainly, it has certainly accelerated the acceptance of technology. And if there were any naysayers in certain industries who were slightly reluctant to go further and go beyond, have certainly been forced to accept it and also see the better side of it and the use of it. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Now I request Ms. Rupal Sinha, CEO of Quest Corporation, to share her thought on the topic.
Yeah, thank you so much, and good afternoon to all. After listening to all the panelists here, yes, I think everyone has spoken much about digitization and technology as a driver now, and of course in future. I come from facility management background, where we deal with a large force of blue-collar to gray-collared worker, and providing these services in this pandemic time, especially in the sectors which are very much open, whether it was banking, it was supply chain management, healthcare. I think it was a mixed bag, but the outcome has been brilliant. In terms of regulatory norms driving, in these pandemic time, classifying all these workers as essential services was a quick measure from the government in terms of recognition, and making it more and more, professional to give this kind of a service in these difficult times. Training and immediately working, coming on from the security perspective, space management perspective to people, we had to actually, in our businesses, we had to actually go to a digital drive or an application drive which had to give result in 2 weeks time. A banking, who had to keep their shops open or the offices open, branches open, ATMs have to continue working. In this, how do you ensure that not only the blue-collared worker is cleaning, is maintaining the assets, which mean all the infrastructure assets put together, but at the same time, the ask was also that how I ensure, how our customers ensure the flow of people, how to ensure the health of the people, how to ensure if the people are coming, the 33% or whatever their boardroom decided in terms of the, occupancy rate in their organization. Getting to that level of digitization, fast-tracked us, our IT team, our tech team, and we did it. It's not that not only us, I'm talking more as not as my company, but more as an industry in one or shape form. The security and facility company came as quite a winner to support the many sectors in terms of integrating, and people who are from tech as in the audience and at the panelists would concur with me, integrating at such a short time of various platforms to give a seamless operations and tech operations to a customer where the customer is not only monitoring the health of the visitor or the employee, but also ensuring that the hybrid model is work from home is maintained, cyber IT protocols are done, and the BCP is actually at the best and at the highest. So overnight, we saw our chief security officers turning and collaborating with chief information officers as well. And there was no time to train anyone. It was just you got to get it up and start performing. So these were a couple of, the transformation which came from our industry, where we come from, which is highly manpower driven, to bring such kind of stability and institute BCP for our customers, carry ourselves in that journey to ensure, that from destabilization to stabilization, that entire journey holding our customers and for ourselves as well. And the last, the motivation of our own people at that time when everyone is at the home, behind, their desktops. Our team was all on the drive in the field, ensuring their health, ensuring their vaccination. So for us, our industry went from right from a manpower provision to the ultimate level of IT protocol setting. So that was a variance at which in no time we had to come to to support from the industry. We had to support our customer base. So it's a good journey. And of course, a lot of new cultures has come. We see an integration of man-tech solution going forward in terms of infrastructure protection, in terms of data protection, in terms of people process management. So I think that's going to be the future norm of all these, of how we run any organization, because we are there is an infrastructure. Our industry will, one or the shape or form, we will definitely be part of that seamless operation. So that's where we saw the transformation.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your opinion and experience on the matter. Most certainly, these uncertain times have ensured that various domains within the organization also work in conjunction and coordination to ensure that the output of the employee is optimized in these times, and the business continuity is ensured, and the strategic interests of the business do not take a massive hit or do not need to be shunned away, but rather at the right opportune time be impacted upon and be actioned upon to gain from this environment. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for sharing their thoughts on the matter. I would like to concur from Mr. Sumit if we have the time to take on questions, or should we conclude with our panel discussion?
Since we started 15 minutes late, we still have 10 to 12 minutes more. If you would like to wish, you can have one round of more discussion with the panelists in another 10, 12 minutes, please.
Sure. So my first question will be to Mr. Harsh, and my question is that how has the perception of risk changed for businesses overall in the post-COVID-19 era? Can we have a bit of an understanding of the comparison as to how businesses approached the risk aspect of things prior to COVID, and what is the change in the ideology now?
Part, I'll keep it brief in the interest of time. If you see in the pre-COVID world, risk management was specifically focused on identifying areas only in financial services or insurance. I think organizations, even in the boardroom, we used to only look at risks saying that, are these insurable? Can these be outsourced? Or, are they appearing from the treasury team or the investment team? But today, risk management has been looked at as a qualitative aspect. You're going to be looking at geopolitical events, climate change, technology disruption, global supply chain issues. I was reading an article that there's a massive ship which caught fire, and eventually about 2,000 cars carrying containers of Porsche and Volkswagen are no longer coming to the port. So these kind of events are organizations ready to prepare for, and that calls for an investment in enterprise risk management. There is financial risk management, there is supply chain risk management, but ERM, which is enterprise-wide risk management, covers all these categories of risks. So what we are seeing in a post-crisis world is a common acceptance of a risk culture. And that can happen only when the board sets up a risk committee. They hire a chief risk officer. The chief risk officer then identifies risk champions in every department, whether it's sales, marketing, legal, R&D, accounting, treasury, investments, etc. And these risk champions, of course, they are domain specialists, but their role is to constantly identify, assess, and mitigate those risks. And 4 or 5 quick bullet points which are coming to my mind is organizations will now start connecting risk management to front office operations, which means the moment you're taking a decision, first evaluate everything from a risk perspective. What can go wrong? And only when you know that this can go wrong, you take a calculative decision. And that's why you're trying to cut the source of the risk. The second is you're going to be focusing on technology. So a lot of risk tech has started taking place. We're going to align risk policies with business strategy. So if you're expanding to China, opening a plant in Japan, exporting goods to Australia, coming up with an IPO, merging with a company, all these strategic decisions will now be looked at from a risk perspective. The fourth point is being active, not passive or reactive. So risk managers are supposed to do a lot of job in terms of identifying black swans, gray rhinos, emerging risks, planning 10 years from now. I think we're only good at preparing projections for 5 years, but then we often ignore the risks which need to be looked at in the next 5 to 7 years. And the last part, like I said, skill is very, very important. So, we are in fact working with a lot of universities and edtech companies to see how they can support their students in preparing for the Institute of Risk Management's global examinations, where they can clear the level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and eventually become a certified fellow or a chief risk officer.
Thank you for your opinion on this matter. And of course, what we can concur from here is that organizations overall have moved from more of a telescopic view on risk to more of a microscopic view on risk. And it's not only about one incident, one event impacting the business, but also various events across geographies, across cultures where the business is actionable, where the business is impacting lives, that these all minor events also constitute to impact the business in a big and holistic manner. And this is what I concur from this, that the organizations have had this change of opinion when it comes to risk and tackling risks accordingly. Thank you for this thought. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumanta De that online education and education tech has become the buzzword everywhere. So, how do you see the industry progressing in conjunction with traditional or pre-existing methodology, which is expected to resume in the coming months, if I may say so?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yes.
Thanks, Parth. Like I said, the edtech industry has actually been around from much before the pandemic, and it was already present, it was already doing well, but it's just that the rate of adoption for edtech has actually massively increased. Now, coming to your particular question, I think both the edtech industry and the traditional education ecosystem, both of them can and they will coexist together harmoniously for a few reasons. The first is that technology is actually the mainstay in education, and everyone today sort of acknowledges its role. Even if you look at the government initiatives with related to digitization of school books, building LMS platforms, online testing systems, etc. Now, education is a concurrent list subject, meaning the center makes the policy and the states implement it. But even if you look at how states are going about it, everybody is taking cue from the center when it comes to how they should think about technology in education. That the fact that they need to have a centralized database of students from all across the states, know how they are performing, have some amount of content on these learning management systems, etc. So, because the government is such a large stakeholder in education in India, it is the largest stakeholder in education, and because the government has realized the potential of technology and it's making a lot of efforts to integrate technology in education, that's why I think EdTech in general is going to stay here. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that edtech platforms actually provide a lot of supplementary, it's a great supplementary source of learning with new methods of teaching, graphical interfaces. These days we have gamified tests, for example, right? That's taking on in a huge measure. So all of these things actually aid in the rate at which students pick up new concepts, the rate at which they learn new things, right? And that, from a consumer perspective, is an extremely engrossing and engaging sort of aspect. Lastly, I think the barriers of access and affordability that edtech platforms have helped break, that is going to be the mainstay. I'll just give you a quick example from Unacademy, the company that I work at. When the IIT JEE results were announced last year, one of the rankers, the top rankers, was an Unacademy student. And, we were really thrilled. So we called him up and we asked him, where does he stay, his family background, etc. And it turned out that he actually lived in a small village in Nadia district in West Bengal, where COVID or no COVID, there was no way that he could have accessed the best of teachers, if it was not for EdTech. And that reality exists irrespective of whether we are out of the pandemic or not. It exists in India. The access to the best teachers, the ability to afford them while you're staying at home and not having to go to large cities like Delhi, Kota, Ahmedabad, whatever. That is a reality that's going to stay. And that's why I think it's a mutual coexisting system between EdTech and education, traditional education. Both need to learn from each other, inculcate the best parts of both systems, and ultimately benefit the students and aid in nation building.
Thank you, Mr. De. With respect to your response, there's another question that arises in my mind. When we have talked about education tech and the traditional method of education, we have emphasized on the importance of both in isolation rather than in conjunction, more or less. So my thought that comes to mind with respect to this is that how do we attempt rather to probably standardize the method of education by inculcating technology? How can organizations work with state-sponsored authorities or central authorities to inculcate technology in a very optimized manner, rather than being very subjective and sort of a decision-based process on that individual? Which I certainly respect, that autonomy should certainly be there, but how do we do the greater good in conjunction with the state authorities? If you could
Sure.
share your thoughts on this.
Sure. So I think if you look at how our education system is sort of built up, right? When you're in school, you're reading books that are approved by NCERT, right? If you're in CBSE sort of related schools, and then once you get into the college sort of medium, you start understanding the why and how and what of concepts rather than going in a set direction of A, B, C, D, E. So the way standardization can be achieved, of course, is number one, the industry needs to align with the standards that the government recognizes as being critical to develop the overall ecosystem. If you look at it, there are a lot of upskilling companies in India when it comes to the edtech, right? Edtech has a huge value chain starting from K-12 to upskilling. Now, the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and NSDC have actually come up with qualification packs and NOS standards, etc., which align the skill courses to, firstly, what the government thinks that these courses should have. Secondly, what the industry needs. Now, that sort of alignment, it is possible in the upper chains of the value system when it comes to skilling. The same thing needs to be applied when it comes to, let's say, basic education, because that's when you need to align what you're teaching with the curriculum that, let's say, the government has and the way that the government or the autonomous or our regulators, the way they had shaped it up. That's how we can actually achieve standardization across various companies. At the same time, we have to realize that some amount of divergence is going to be there in how you deliver the content, right? So in some ways, the content could be delivered through, let's say, exam-based systems or gamified systems where consumers interact with the system more than listen in a one-way lecture. In some other cases, it could be a one-way lecture, whatever works. But underlining all of that, the pedagogy has to be aligned to NCERT or to any regulatory authorities that are there. And I think all the companies are actually moving in that direction right now. So one of the crucial things, if I can just add on, is we all realize that when a topic is being taught, the ultimate objective is to define what the learning outcome is going to be for the student. And if you don't have learning outcomes on a particular topic or subject, then it's very difficult to gauge whether the student has firstly understood it, secondly, can progress to the next level or whatever. Now, these learning outcomes are actually standardized across subjects, topics by our regulators. So when we build courses on any subject or topic, we align it to the learning outcomes. Irrespective of how you teach it, the student should take away X, Y, Z from your course. And that's the level of standardization that the industry is moving towards.
Right. Thank you. I think when you put it in this manner, and particularly the learning outcome, I think that is what matters. And that should be the focal point of trying to standardize the methodology that our education system should adopt. And rather, we'll hope that in times to come, it happens in this particular manner. I'll move on to Ms. Rupal Sinha, ma'am. One topic that is most certainly being talked about is return to office. And one of the common aspects of this return to office is that the organizations intend to do it in a phased manner. However, the end result being that yes, employees should be then subsequently post this exercise return to office as usual, or as we can say in the pre-COVID era. I would like to hear from you, ma'am. Do we need to have a fundamental shift in our approach to working in the office aspect, or should we move in the contextual way that by focusing rather on the phased manner of RTO that organizations are adopting right now? You're on mute, ma'am, if I may.
Yeah. So return to work is happening. The transitions have started. Now, return to work is bringing a couple of outcomes here. Whether the return to work doesn't mean that you got to go back to your restoration programs. The world has changed. The customer, because you're serving for someone, you're generating revenues. You got to get into your market as well. The need of your customer has changed today. The value propositions have changed. The capability, skill sets required within the organization has changed. The I think Indian entrepreneurs and Indian business houses, have understood that there is nothing called 9 to 5 push button, punching the attendance system. At least those are some of the good ticks which has happened and which is prompting the return to work. So while facilities on one side have shrunk because of immediate measures the entrepreneurs have taken or the business houses have taken, those matters were for 2020 and 21. 22 is very upbeat. The businesses have either weakened, unaffected, or the business have mushroomed. And all three categories of businesses need to redefine their business strategies. So, we spoke about Chief Risk Officer. I think the organization today and the return to work is coming with risk awareness rather than bringing people back or going back to the business with risk averseness. We know that the risk is going to stay. It will come in one or the other shape. We thought that COVID is behind, Omicron came. We thought Omicron is behind, we had now Russia, Ukraine coming. So geopolitical risks will be there, regulatory risks will be there. The one elephant which I think each organization with so much of digitization has come is the biggest elephant today for us is the in the entire ecosystem of risk would be to handle the scenario. The market risks can be, because these are calculated risks. Regulatory risks still can be offset because there are norms. With those norms, you can go back and work around those norms and design yourself. What do you do with this digital tsunami that is not only impacting from your all stakeholders? Your customers are watching you. Your consumer behaviors are watching you. How do you handle that? That is something is going to drive the future, because as an organization, you can be regulated well, and you can offset and you can come up with the strategize yourself. But the digitization, the digital marketing, which is going today in a complete unregulated fashion. How do you handle that? And if you ask me as an organization head myself, and many other CEOs today would say that this is the most important risk we are seeing going forward. We can bring the risk around financial crisis. We can bring the risk mitigations of these risks are still under, I'm not saying controllable in the nature, but they have been existing in past. And they have been, there are enough case studies, there are enough, barriers to that. There are enough people and expertise to handle those types of risks. But what is coming forward in terms of this digital tsunami is something very reputational risk is going to be the driver in return to work. So yes, there will be a hybrid model going forward. I don't think we should we are ruling that out. Every organization is strategizing how many people have to be come to the office. Everyone decide what is the percentage of population that needs to come to the office, what can be given a flexible environment. But I don't see that going forward, and I do see all sorts of things coming as revenge return to work, which means that, well, I've been sitting at home for so long, I have to go to the office. All things are coming at the moment, but I think the future definitely is a hybrid model, flexible timelines. These are not going to go away. And I can see that our service delivery and our ecosystem, any ecosystem, is now getting built around these factors.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And most certainly, one major impact that COVID-19 has had on humanity is the redirection of priorities which people have made during this particular time. And therefore, it is all the more imperative for organizations to have a relook and a rethink with respect to the work culture, and of course optimizing their products and services as per customer requirement, because customer himself or herself, I may say, has become highly informed during this pandemic time, and they are aware of anything and every nuance of a particular product or service, because now it is available in the palm of their hand. So in that manner, most certainly, organizations now need to build that strategic resilience to withstand issues of such kind and risks, if I may say, of such kind. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your opinion on this matter. I believe we have already exceeded the timeline for this panel discussion. So if I may, I will just make a concluding remark. So this to all event attendees, that while the COVID-19 pandemic continues to pose a fundamental challenge to our economy and society, several key learnings have become apparent. In navigating the unprecedented economic and social disruption, most businesses have exhibited a significant degree of resiliency and ingenuity. This crisis has accelerated major changes already underway in markets and facilitated critical changes within organizations. It has also exposed flaws in the architecture of globalization and social structures, such that those issues can begin to be more effectively addressed. These types of learnings will position businesses well to harness new opportunities going forward and respond to other inevitable challenges that they face. And with this, I would like to conclude with a remark by P.B. Shelley. And he said in his poem that when winter comes, can spring be far behind? And most certainly, this is what spirit of humanity has shown. And most certainly, the spirit of entrepreneurship and businesses have shown. And we all hope that they continue to rise and shine even in spite of such risks and the pandemic that has followed. Thank you so much. And now I hand over the reins of this discussion to Mr. Sumit Gupta.
Thank you so much, Captain Dayal. Indeed was a very, very interesting discussion, and I'm sure there were a lot of takeaways for all our participants who have joined us. And with this, we come to the conclusion of today's session. And we would be circulating the India Risk Survey report to all our participants. And we invite any comments, any suggestion that you may have, which we could incorporate in our next edition. And any last comment, Rohit, would you like to share anything?
No, Sumit, as a conclusion, I think I would just like to thank Vicky and all the co-panelists that were part of it and that would make it today. And, again, share their, wisdom with us. So I think, we will continue to work together with Vicky on some of the other areas as well, where we can and bring some knowledge back to the corporate as well. So let's look forward to the 10th or the 11th edition of the report as well. And I hope everyone gains a lot of wisdom from the report as it gets circulated and people are able to draw their corporate strategies with the India Risk Survey. So thank you so much. Thanks again to Vicky for the opportunity extended to me. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your support. And thank you all our participants for your patience, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
absolutely.